A footprint disappears beneath fresh rain. For a moment, the ground remembers that someone was here, then the evidence is gone. No document records the movement. No authority asks where the person was going. No rulebook explains what they were allowed to do. And yet somehow, the group continues. People share food, children remain protected, tools are returned, conflicts are resolved, dangerous behaviors remembered. The modern mind finds this strange, because we are accustomed to a world where almost everything is written down. What you can build, where you can drive, what you can buy. What happens when you hurt someone? Thousands of rules surround ordinary life so completely that we rarely notice them. Remove them, and modern society begins to feel impossible. But for most of human history, there were no law books, no police departments, no courts, no prisons, no government offices explaining what was legal and what was forbidden. And yet humans survived for hundreds of thousands of years. So the obvious question becomes something much deeper. How did people know what they were allowed to do? The answer begins with something older than law, something much harder to escape. Everyone knew everyone. Imagine a small group of 20 or 30 humans moving through a landscape. There are no strangers in the modern sense. The people around you are the people who feed you, the people who protect your children, the people who remember your mistakes, the people who know what happened yesterday and the day before that. There's almost nowhere for anonymity to exist. If you take someone else's food, they know. If you betray someone, others remember. If you repeatedly create conflict, your reputation follows you. There's no need for a database. The database is inside people's memories. This changes the nature of behavior completely. Modern societies often regulate strangers. Ancient communities regulated people they knew intimately. And that distinction matters. A written law can tell you that stealing is forbidden. But imagine something more immediate. The person whose food you just stole is sitting beside you. Their child saw you. Your brother saw you. The group saw you. And tomorrow, when food is distributed again, everyone remembers. The punishment does not need to come from a distant institution. It can come through trust, through reputation, through cooperation, through the simple question, who can we depend on? This may have been one of humanity's oldest systems of social control. Not law, reciprocity. You help me today, I help you tomorrow. You share food when I am unsuccessful. I share food when you are. You protect my child, I protect yours. The system is invisible, but its consequences are real. And because survival depends on cooperation, selfish behavior becomes expensive. A person who constantly takes without giving eventually becomes a problem. Not because a government declares them criminal, but because fewer people want to cooperate with them. Their social world begins to shrink. And in a small community, that can be devastating. But cooperation alone cannot prevent conflict. Humans are not naturally peaceful creatures. People compete. They become jealous. They misunderstand each other. They fight over resources. They form alliances. They hold grudges. So what happens when someone crosses a boundary? The answer is surprisingly complicated. There was no single prehistoric justice system. Different societies developed different customs, expectations, rituals, and forms of conflict resolution. Some disputes may have involved mediation. Some involved compensation. Some involved retaliation. Some may have ended in reconciliation. And in extreme cases, individuals could be expelled or killed. The important point is not that ancient humans had no rules. They clearly did. The important point is that their rules were often embedded in social life rather than separated into formal law. There was no sharp line between morality, custom, survival, and social expectation. They were the same system. A child learns this before understanding the concept of law. They watch, they imitate, they are corrected. They observe who gets angry, who receives food first, who is trusted with important tasks, who tells stories, who is respected, who is avoided. No one needs to hand the child a legal textbook. The environment teaches the rules, and the most powerful teacher is often consequence. Touch the fire, it burns. Take someone's food, they become angry. Break a useful tool, someone has to repair it. Help another person, they may help you later. The lesson becomes attached to experience, and experience is difficult to forget. This is where modern people sometimes misunderstand prehistoric society. We imagine that without written laws, there must have been chaos. But rules do not need to be written to exist. A queue has rules, a family has rules, a friendship has rules, a game has rules. Most of them are learned without anyone reading a legal document. You know when someone has interrupted you. You know when someone has betrayed your trust. You know when an apology feels sincere. Human beings are extraordinarily good at navigating these invisible systems. And evolution gave us a reason to be. For hundreds of thousands of years, social intelligence was not entertainment. It was survival equipment. Consider gossip. Modern people often treat gossip as meaningless conversation. But in a small community, information about other people can be incredibly valuable. Who can be trusted? Who keeps promises? Who shares food? Who becomes aggressive? Who is generous? Who repeatedly causes problems? A person's reputation becomes a form of social currency. And because everyone lives close together, reputation travels quickly. This creates something remarkably similar to an informal justice system. You don't need an officer standing at the edge of the camp. Everyone is watching. Not constantly, not deliberately, but naturally. Because everyone has something at stake. And this produces a strange kind of freedom. You're not controlled by a giant institution, but you're also never completely independent. Your actions exist inside a web of relationships. Every decision affects someone else. Every betrayal creates a memory. Every act of generosity creates another memory. Your identity is partly constructed by the people around you. You're not simply an individual. You are someone's brother, someone's mother, someone's hunting partner, someone's rival, someone's friend, someone's debt, someone's ally. And because your survival depends on these relationships, destroying them can be more dangerous than breaking any written rule. But then something changes. Humans begin living in larger groups, much larger. Villages emerge, then towns, then cities. And suddenly, everyone does not know everyone. This creates a problem that small communities rarely faced. What happens when the person judging you doesn't know you? Memory becomes weaker, reputation becomes local, strangers become normal. A person can commit an act against someone they have never met before. And the victim may know nothing about their family, nothing about their history, nothing about their reputation. The old social system begins to strain. Agriculture makes this problem even larger. People begin storing food. Land becomes valuable. Property becomes permanent. Livestock can be owned. Surpluses can be accumulated. Resources can be inherited. Now conflicts are no longer only about today's meal. They can be about a field, a house, a herd, a storehouse, an inheritance, a boundary that may matter for generations. The stakes become larger, and as the stakes grow, informal agreements become harder to maintain. Someone eventually needs to answer a question. Who owns what? Writing changes everything. For the first time, rules can exist outside human memory. A decision can be recorded. A debt can be written. A transaction can be preserved. An agreement can survive the death of the people who made it. This is one of the great transformations in human history. The rule is no longer only something people remember. It becomes something society can point to, something external, something that can be enforced. And eventually, formal law emerges. Not because humans suddenly discovered morality, but because societies became too large for memory alone to manage. One of the earliest known legal traditions comes from ancient Mesopotamia. Long before modern governments, rulers in cities were already recording rules concerning property, contracts, injuries, marriage, labor, and punishment. The famous Code of Hammurabi is one example. But it did not appear in a vacuum. It emerged from a much older world of customs and expectations. Written law did not create social order from nothing. It formalized systems that communities had already been negotiating for generations. The tablet was new. The need for order was ancient, and this reveals something important. Humans did not evolve from chaos into law. They evolved from small-scale social regulation into increasingly formal systems of regulation. First came relationships, then customs, then shared expectations, then leaders and mediators, then written rules, then institutions capable of enforcing those rules. Law was not the beginning. It was the architecture built on top of something much older. But formal law creates another transformation. It separates the person enforcing the rule from the people affected by it. In a small group, your conflict might involve someone you have known your entire life. In a city, the person judging the dispute may be a stranger. This can make justice more consistent, but it can also make it less personal. A written rule can be applied to people who have no relationship with each other. That is one of the great advantages of civilization, and perhaps one of its great costs. The system becomes more predictable, but less intimate. Ancient humans had another powerful tool, Ritual. Ritual tells people how to behave without requiring constant explanation. Who speaks first? Who shares food? Who marries whom? Who leads ceremonies? How the dead are treated? When celebrations occur, what actions are considered unacceptable? These practices create structure, and because they are repeated, they become almost invisible. A person does not wake up every morning thinking, I must follow the rules of my culture. They simply live. That may be one of the deepest secrets of social order. The strongest rules are often the ones people no longer experience as rules. And this still exists today. You probably follow hundreds of social expectations every day without thinking about them. You stand at a certain distance when speaking to someone. You lower your voice in certain places. You wait your turn. You recognize when someone is joking. You understand when an apology is expected. You know that certain behaviors will make people trust you less. None of these things require a police officer. They work because human beings are deeply sensitive to social approval and rejection. The ancient system never disappeared. We simply built another system on top of it. This is why the question, why did ancient humans never need laws, is slightly misleading. They did need rules. They needed them desperately. What they often did not need was formal law in the modern sense. Their communities were small enough for reputation to function. Their economies were limited enough for social memory to matter. Their relationships were close enough for trust to regulate behavior. And their survival was interconnected enough that harming another person could eventually harm yourself. As populations grew, those conditions disappeared, and law filled the gap. There's something almost poetic about that transition. The first humans were surrounded by people who knew them. Modern humans are surrounded by systems that know their behavior. We move from faces to records, from memory to documents, from reputation to identification, from custom to legislation, from community judgment to institutions. And perhaps that is the real story of law. Not the invention of rules, but the invention of distance. Distance between strangers. Distance between actions and consequences. Distance between the person who breaks the rule and the person who enforces it. Civilization made that distance possible and necessary, but beneath the courts, governments, police, and legal codes, the older system remains. We still care what other people think. We still fear rejection. We still reward generosity. We still remember betrayal. We still form alliances. We still tell stories about who can be trusted. The human brain that once survived inside a small prehistoric camp is still operating inside the modern world. The environment changed. The instincts did not disappear. They simply found new structures to live inside. And perhaps the most unsettling realization is this. Humans did not create laws because they finally learned how to behave. They created laws because the world became too large for human relationships alone to control. Law became necessary when strangers became normal, when memory became insufficient, when property became permanent, when communities grew beyond the size of a shared camp, and when consequences could no longer travel naturally through a network of relationships. The law became the memory of a society too large to remember everything itself. So the next time you see a modern law written on a page, imagine how strange it would have looked to someone living 100,000 years ago. A rule detached from a face, a punishment detached from a relationship, a judgment made by someone who may never have met you. It would have been almost incomprehensible. Because for most of human history, society was not something people entered. It was something they lived inside. There was no outside, no anonymous city waiting beyond the horizon, no institution standing between you and everyone else. Only people, watching, remembering, helping, judging, and depending on one another. Perhaps that was humanity's first law, not written anywhere, not spoken by a ruler, simply understood. You survive because others do, and they survive because you do. Everything that came afterward, courts, police, governments, prisons, legal codes, may simply be the increasingly complicated architecture built around that ancient truth.